Here are the headlines for Saturday evening, August 24, 2024. Manhunt for Arab-looking man after 3 killed, 8 wounded in mass stabbing in Germany. A major manhunt is underway in Solingen, Germany, after a mass stabbing attack at the city's Festival of Diversity killed 3 people and wounded 8 others. The attacker, described by witnesses as an Arab-looking young man, fled the scene and remains at large. The incident has sparked debate about immigration and violence in Germany, with some politicians calling for tougher laws on knife ownership, while others argue that the country's open borders are to blame. Despite the controversy, no U.S. media outlets have reported the witness descriptions of the attacker as Arab-looking, instead focusing on calls for stricter gun control measures. Russia's capture of Pokrovsk could reshape the conflict's dynamics. Russian forces are rapidly approaching the Ukrainian town of Pokrovsk, a pivotal military logistics hub. Ukrainian officials have urged locals to evacuate within 2 weeks as Russian forces gain ground, with one official admitting that the enemy is advancing faster than expected. The poor quality of Ukraine's recruits has been cited as a reason for Russia's swift gains, with some troops reportedly lacking the will to fight and receiving inadequate training. The top 10 countries by gold reserves in 2024, and who's adding the most. Central banks hold approximately a fifth of all the gold mined throughout history due to its safety, liquidity, and return characteristics. The United States has the most gold reserves, with 8,133 tons valued at $579 billion. Amid escalating geopolitical tensions and discussions around de-dollarization, interest in gold purchases is rising, particularly among countries like Russia and China seeking to diversify their reserves away from the dollar. Over the past decade, these two countries have bought gold at the fastest pace, with Russia's reserves increasing by 1,298 tons and China's by 1,181 tons between 2013 and 2023. Curcumin is effective in reducing cardiometabolic risk factors study. Researchers in Thailand conducted a randomized placebo-controlled study that found curcumin significantly reduced arterial stiffness and potential cardiovascular disease risk in patients with type 2 diabetes and obesity. The study involved 227 participants who took either 6 capsules of curcumin per day or a placebo for 12 months. The results showed significant improvements in pulse wave velocity, cardiometabolic risk factors, including total cholesterol, triglycerides, and uric acid levels, as well as waist circumference, body fat, and visceral fat measurements. No serious adverse effects were noted among the curcumin-treated group, highlighting its potential role in maintaining or improving cardiometabolic health. Elon's SpaceX to rescue stranded astronauts after National Aeronautics and Space Administration dumps Boeing. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has selected Elon Musk's SpaceX to bring home the 2 United States astronauts who were forced to extend their stay at the International Space Station due to technical issues with Boeing's spacecraft. The contingency plan means that astronauts Barry Wilmore and Sunita Williams will hitch a ride home on SpaceX's Crew Dragon capsule during a mission slated to launch in late September, which would put them back on United States soil in February. These are the countries with the highest wealth inequality. The distribution of wealth across countries reveals significant disparities, with some nations experiencing increased wealth inequality over the past 15 years. South Africa ranks highest in terms of wealth inequality, where 10% of the population controls approximately 80% of the country's wealth. Other countries, such as Brazil and Sweden, also exhibit high levels of wealth concentration. In contrast, countries like the United States, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, South Korea, and Hong Kong have seen a marginal decline in wealth inequality since 2008, with the middle segment experiencing faster wealth gains than those in higher wealth brackets. Woman arrested for silently praying outside abortion clinic wins $17,000 from police. Isabel Vaughan Spruce, the United Kingdom March for Life director, was arrested by the West Midlands Police in Birmingham, England, while quietly praying outside an abortion clinic. She was detained for allegedly violating a public space protection order, but later filed a claim accusing the police of false imprisonment, assault, and wrongful arrest. The police have now paid her approximately $17,000 in settlement. Vaughan Spruce expressed delight and vindication at the outcome, but also emphasized that she hopes the police have learned a lesson that silent prayer is not a criminal activity. Government report links high fluoride exposure with low intelligence quotient among children. A report by the National Toxicology Program found that high levels of fluoride exposure in children are consistently associated with lower intelligence quotient scores and potentially other neurodevelopmental issues. The program reviewed 72 studies and found that 64 of them showed an inverse association between estimated fluoride exposure and intelligence quotient in children, meaning higher exposure was linked to lower intelligence quotient and vice versa. High exposure is defined as drinking water with fluoride concentrations exceeding the 1.5 milligrams per liter limit set by the World Health Organization. Red Sea crisis. Footage captures Suezmax tanker explosion after Houthi missile strike as West fails to secure choke point. Western nations led by the United States and those across Europe have failed to stop Iran-backed Houthi rebels from launching missile and drone strikes on merchant vessels in the southern Red Sea and Gulf of Oman. Despite numerous military operations committed to ensuring freedom of navigation and maritime security, the West has repeatedly failed to prevent these attacks. The latest incident occurred earlier this week when a Greek-flagged oil tanker was attacked by Houthi rebels, forcing at least one European Union warship to rescue the crew. This attack raises concerns about the potential for a major environmental disaster in the Red Sea, as well as the ability of Western militaries to protect commercial vessels and ensure maritime security in this critical region. Snipers respond to Islamist-inspired rebellion, hostage crisis at Russian prison. A major uprising occurred at the IK-19 Surovikino maximum security prison in southwestern Russia's Volgograd region, resulting in the deaths of several officers and the taking of multiple staff members hostage by Islamist prisoners affiliated with the Islamic State militant group. The National Guard of Russia neutralized 4 prisoners who had taken employees hostage, freeing the hostages after a special forces operation. At least 3 prison guards were killed, and 2 attackers later succumbed to their wounds at a hospital. The assailants reportedly used crude weapons and stabbed several employees during the uprising. New York to pay $155 per megawatt hour for wind power. Current rate is $36 per MWH. New York State signed contracts to buy electricity from 2 wind farms at $155 per megawatt hour and $146 per megawatt hour, respectively, which is 4 times the current cost of $36 per megawatt hour. The owners of the wind farms, Equinor and Ørsted, foreign corporations, will make $54 per megawatt hour and $45 per megawatt hour, respectively, after receiving subsidies of $30 per megawatt hour from the federal government. This deal will result in New York residents paying over 4 times the going rate for energy, with the United States sending a total of $6 billion to these foreign companies. Argentina's gold reserves arrive in London. In the month of June, the United Kingdom received a gold shipment worth $150 million from Argentina. The gold was most likely sent by the Central Bank of Argentina to be used as collateral in the London bullion market. According to reports, 3 tons of gold were imported from Argentina, which is 5% of the central bank's total reserves of 62 tons. The International Monetary Fund allows for swapped gold to remain on a country's balance sheet, and it appears that the Central Bank of Argentina has kept the swapped-out gold on their books. The United States fertility rate drops to record low. Centers for Disease Control. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's National Center for Health Statistics reported that the fertility rate in the United States has dropped to its lowest level in history. The final data from 2023 showed a decline of 3% from the previous year, resulting in 54.5 births per 1,000 females aged 15 to 44. This is the lowest rate on record, with the number of births also dropping to 3.59 million in 2023, the lowest since 1979. The peak was in 2007, when 4.3 million births were recorded. Hungary may send migrants to Brussels to avenge asylum fine. Hungary is threatening to transport migrants arriving at its border directly to Brussels unless it can resolve a dispute with the European Union over penalties for its asylum policies. The European Court of Justice has imposed a $200 million penalty plus an additional $1 million daily fine on Hungary for Prime Minister Viktor Orban's non-compliance with the court's earlier judgment on protecting asylum seekers. Hungary's minister in charge of the Prime Minister's office, Gergely Gayas, said that negotiations with the European Commission will start in September, and if they fail, migrants will be handed one-way tickets to Brussels. This move echoes Texas's decision to bus migrants from its border to New York and other sanctuary cities in the United States. COVID-19, the preventable pandemic. A Blue Ribbon Commission led by former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe concluded that the COVID-19 pandemic was totally preventable, citing the Chinese government's aggressive opposition to honesty, transparency, and accountability. The commission found that Beijing withheld key details about the virus, destroyed samples, and gagged scientists. China's cover-up led to a delay in warning the world, allowing the virus to spread and resulting in 28 million excess deaths worldwide. The pandemic cost the United States alone $18 trillion, including $8.6 trillion in excess deaths, $1.8 trillion in income lost, and $6 trillion in chronic conditions like long COVID. It's socialism. Peter Schiff destroys Kamala Harris' economic policy agenda. Peter Schiff argued that free market forces rather than government mandates are the best way to achieve long-term economic stability and prosperity. He expressed his concerns about the current state of the global economy and the potential risks on the horizon, citing his unwavering belief in gold as a hedge against inflation and economic instability. According to Schiff, the current economic environment is ripe for a significant shift in market dynamics, with gold poised to play a central role in the years ahead. He emphasized the importance of sound economic principles and warned about the dangers of ignoring them. SpaceX prepares for historic spacewalk under Polaris Dawn mission. Elon Musk's SpaceX is set to dominate the space race once again as it prepares to launch its Falcon 9 rocket under the Polaris program next Monday, ferrying 4 astronauts to space via Dragon capsule. This mission will mark several milestones, including the first commercial spacewalk, flying higher in Earth's orbit than anyone since the Apollo program, testing laser-based Starlink communications, and conducting research on human health during long-duration space flights. The crew will also conduct nearly 40 critical health research experiments while raising funds for Stu Children's Research Hospital. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump will end war on small farms to save nation's food supply chain. In the United States, small farms have significantly declined in recent years, accounting for less than 25% of food production by 2020, down from nearly half in the 1990s. This decline is attributed to the rise of mega-factory farms, high operation costs, and climate regulations that burden small farmers. In contrast, small farms are deeply rooted in communities and provide real, nutritious food to their neighbors, rather than contributing to the processed food industry's dominance over the nation's food supply chain. To regain control of the food supply chain, it is essential for Americans to support local farmers and make small farms great again by boycotting the processed food industry and buying local food. It has not worked once, so why would a politician go all in on price controls now? Politicians who advocate for centrally planned economies believe that technology has made it possible to implement effective price controls without causing negative consequences such as inflation. They plan to use big tech and surveillance systems to track individual carbon footprints and control spending, allowing the government to dictate what people can eat, how they travel, and other personal choices. However, this approach is likely to lead to serfdom and tyranny, as it would require overriding individual incentives and limiting freedom of choice, similar to the failed experiment in Venezuela, where price controls led to widespread poverty and desperation. Target chief executive officer says retailers can't price gouge in competitive industry. Target CEO Brian Cornell dismissed claims that businesses are price gouging, saying retailers cannot engage in the practice due to intense competition. The statement comes as Vice President Kamala Harris has proposed a federal price gouging ban on food and grocery industries. Cornell explained that Target operates in a penny business with small profit margins, making it essential for the company to be responsible to consumers who have the power to seek lower prices elsewhere. Despite this, some lawmakers continue to push for legislation to combat alleged price gouging, which they claim is contributing to sticky inflation. Newest United States aid package for Ukraine includes more high-mobility artillery rocket system munitions to attack Russia. The United States has introduced an additional package of military aid to Ukraine worth around $125 million, including munitions for high-mobility artillery rocket systems HIMARS, at a time when Kyiv has acknowledged using the missile system inside Russian territory. The new assistance includes counter-unmanned aerial systems equipment and munitions, as well as additional ammunition for HIMARS. This aid package comes after Ukraine's military openly admitted to using U.S.-provided HIMARS rocket systems to attack Russia and destroy its major infrastructure, including bridges. Beheaded during Black Lives Matter riots, Washington Monument at George Washington University vandalized by pro-Palestinian protesters. The George Washington University Monument of President George Washington was vandalized with graffiti stating "Disclose Divest" now in red spray paint, one of several places targeted by pro-Palestinian protesters. The university had previously suspended 2 student groups, Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace, but the protests continued on the first day of school, with demonstrators trying to get back into a fenced-off area and police present at the scene. This is not the first time the monument has been damaged, as it was beheaded during the Black Lives Matter riots in June 2020 and had only recently been restored by the summer of 2022. Saudi courts oversee surge in executions for drug offenses. The European Saudi Organization for Human Rights reports that dozens of prisoners in Saudi Arabia face the death penalty for drug offenses, despite authorities' pledges to stop the punishment. Executions have surged by 82% since King Salman and his son, Mohammed bin Salman, came to power in 2015. At least 50 people are facing execution in Tabuk General Prison alone, including 34 Egyptians. Human rights groups warn of abuses faced by those on death row, including denial of their right to adequate defense and instances of torture and ill treatment. Gat Summer, 22 shot, 6 dead in Chicago during first 3 days of Democratic National Committee. During the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, 6 people were murdered amid 22 shootings in the first 3 days of the convention, while a member of the Texas delegation was robbed at gunpoint. The violence occurred outside the convention site, which is heavily guarded by police. In contrast to President Joe Biden's claim that violent crime has decreased under his administration, crime rates have actually soared in Chicago over the past year, with 617 homicides recorded in 2023, making it the nation's murder capital for the 12th consecutive year. Hartnett. Gold just surpassed the euro as the world's second-largest reserve asset. Bank of America chief strategist Michael Hartnett has been predicting that going long bonds will be the top trade of the second half of 2024. His thesis is simple. With the United States economy already sputtering and fiscal stimulus as good as it gets, monetary policy will finally get easier as fiscal gets tighter over the next 12 months. This prediction was recently supported by Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's dovish presentation at Jackson Hole, which stunned markets and led to a collapse in yields of 80 basis points since Hartnett started urging clients to buy bonds back in May. Visualizing $5 trillion in global commodity exports by sector, the global commodity export market is valued at over $5 trillion annually, with the energy sector contributing 40% of this value, totaling $2 trillion per year. Oil and its products account for 30% of global commodity exports, worth $1.5 trillion annually. The agriculture sector ranks second with a value of $1.9 trillion per year, primarily driven by crops and forestry exports valued at $1.2 trillion. In contrast, the mineral sector is more equally divided between base metal exports and precious metals and stones. However, this concentration of commodity trade can lead to economic challenges in low or middle income countries that rely heavily on exporting these resources. Zelensky hails Kursk as game changer, is he right? Saturday marks Ukraine's Independence Day, commemorating 33 years since it declared its break from the Soviet Union in 1991. President Volodymyr Zelensky used the ongoing Kursk operation to boast that his armed forces have now effectively returned the war to Russian soil, vowing that Russia will know what retribution is, the permanent temptation of all governments. Governments often rely on deficit spending and inflation as a way to finance their activities, including wars. This creates a dilemma for politicians who want to spend money but do not want to raise taxes or make cuts to popular programs. The temptation is to print more money, which can lead to inflation and devalue savings. Central banks try to anticipate the outcomes of their actions, but they often fail to accurately predict inflationary pressures. If people were aware of these limitations, it could change the way central banks operate and potentially improve the overall monetary system. Illegal immigration lull at southwest border likely temporary, experts say. Panama is struggling to manage the surge of migrants attempting to reach the United States through its Darien Gap region, despite efforts by Mexican authorities to round up and bus migrants back south. The Biden administration had promised funds for repatriation flights, but has yet to provide them, leaving Panama to handle the crisis on its own. Meanwhile, a mass parole program that allowed thousands of immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela into the United States was recently suspended due to concerns over fraud. Largest tech underweight ever going into the most important tech print in years. Nvidia's upcoming earnings report is being highly anticipated as the most important tech earnings in years. Investors are anxious due to concerns that big tech companies have not yet demonstrated significant demand from paying customers for artificial intelligence-powered services, raising questions about how long they will continue investing in this technology, particularly Nvidia's chips. Pretty aggressive retail-driven bounce. 89% of Standard & Poor's 500 stocks are currently trading above their 20-day moving average, the highest percentage this year.